So this person had been hit by a car that left her with a concussion on Sunday, a bruised neck and a bruised shoulder blade. So I'm imagining she may have still been in a hospital or just had gotten out of a hospital, because then it looks like the next day she woke up to an email in my inbox letting me know that my role had been eliminated and I had been impacted by layoffs. She couldn't even get a phone call or a Zoom call or any kind of in-person. She had to wake up to an email that told her that she had lost her job, which is really, really disappointing that companies feel that that's okay to do. Hey everybody, it's Brian from A Life After Layoff, and today I want to talk to you about the state of the labor market and whether or not the workplace is broken beyond repair. Because I've been spending a lot of time on LinkedIn and I'm reading the tea leaves, and there are some companies that are behaving very poorly. And it got me thinking that maybe it's time for us to reevaluate how we approach careers to begin with. But before we get too far into it, if you're interested in more career-related content just like this directly from a corporate recruiter, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and you might also want to hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future content. Unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably noticed that the labor market is an absolute disaster right now. And as I scroll through my LinkedIn feed, I can't help but notice story after story after story of people being treated so poorly as part of these reductions in forces that we're seeing across the entire market. And it's not just one company, it's a lot of companies. And just when you think it couldn't get any worse, another story comes out. And honestly, I thought 2022 was bad, but 2023 is shaping up to here hold my beer level. And in this video, I'm admittedly gonna rant a little bit here. And I don't have a script that I'm following per se, but I wanted to break down what I'm noticing in the employment market specifically, and then how we should be looking at our careers as a whole, because I'm seeing yet another seismic shift in the employment market. And I'm not sure we're going to come out of this one unscathed. And if you stick around to the end of the video, I'm actually going to show you some of these examples in real life of what people are experiencing, these companies behaving badly. So when we look at our careers from the 30,000 foot level, we have to go back a few generations to kind of see how we got where we are today. As I go back to my grandfather's generation, and I'm probably dating myself here as I say this, but he was the generation before the baby boomers. And in his world, when you went off, you got an education or you learned a skill or a trade, and then you went off to work and you worked at an employer for 50 years, you collected a paycheck, and you rode off into the sunset at the end of retirement. You had a pension and all of this kind of stuff. And employers really treated employees like an asset throughout the entirety of their life cycle. And the idea of job hopping was almost completely unheard of back then. In fact, my grandfather worked in a steel mill for the entirety of his career. So did my uncle. So did a lot of other people in my family, where in that generation, they had one job, one employer throughout the entirety of it. Now, he moved into different jobs as he progressed in his career, but he stayed at a single employer. And as the baby boomer generation came along, a lot of those same values followed. People didn't move from employer to employer. There was still a high degree of corporate loyalty. People invested themselves into a company, into a career path, and they stuck with it. And through thick and thin, and they would ride the good times and they would ride the bad times. And sometimes they would have to make decisions that were very difficult, whether it was relocating for a job, if a plant closed down and they were tapped on the shoulder to relocate. You would see that very commonly. But this concept of corporate loyalty was instilled and ingrained into them as well. And of course, during these periods of time, there was layoffs and there was ups and downs in the market. So I'm not going to suggest that nobody got laid off and nobody experienced these things that we're experiencing today, but they weren't nearly as common. Or at least it didn't seem like it. Maybe it's because of the news or something, I don't know. But back then, you could stick with one or maybe two employers through the entirety of your career. And again, you have that pension that we don't even see anymore. I don't think, almost no companies offer a pension plan anymore. It's all switched to 401ks, which means you contribute to it and then they match you a small percentage. And it's not nearly as beneficial to the employee as the pensions were to the generations before. And there's probably a good reason why they decided to get rid of them as a whole, because they were completely employer funded and they could share the cost with employees by creating these 401ks. And of course, it's in the best interest of the corporation to reduce their cost so that they can maximize their profitability. So that was one of the first things in my mind that I'm seeing, where the employer is decoupling this loyalty. There used to be this agreement between the employee and the corporation, that you work for me for an entirety of your career and we'll take care of you. And getting away from pensions basically drew a line in the sand and said, we're no longer loyal to you in the same way. Yet the employee didn't change their loyalty. It's almost like an abusive relationship where this has become normalized. And yet I don't see many people talking about that. And honestly, if you have a pension and you're watching this video, can you leave me a comment? Because I'm just curious if anybody even has them anymore. So as we move into this employee-driven cost model, you also saw things like medical premiums going up. And what do companies do? They start to share the costs there. So now again, this loyalty to the employee is being decoupled because the benefits are weakening. It used to be that you would get your medical insurance paid at 100%. Nowadays, it's very, very rare. In fact, most companies nowadays have awful insurance that's one step above open marketplace, where you're paying $6,000, $7,000 for a deductible and you're still paying $600 out of your paycheck every month for a family. And if you're somebody that doesn't make a lot of money to begin with, that's a huge burden out of your paycheck. It's another example of corporations reducing their loyalty to the employee, but the employee still maintains this fierce loyalty to the employer. And now the most recent is they've taken away job security. Back in the day, you used to have corporations that would go through this cyclical nature, and when they would experience a rough patch, they may reduce their expenses in other ways, but they generally didn't have these huge layoffs like we see today at a moment's notice. The first headwind of an issue, they sniff out that there's a pandemic coming, and it's like they can't wait to lay people off to right-size their business, all in the name of corporate profitability and shareholder value. Then, of course, in this latest round of layoffs, you're seeing a lot of people losing their jobs, not because corporations are losing money, but because they want to lean out to be more profitable for the future. And that's exactly what these major corporations are telling us in their press releases to their shareholders. So what used to be a mutually loyal relationship between employee and employer has been completely wiped out. We no longer have the pensions, we no longer have the medical benefits that we used to, and now we don't even have the job security. And not only do we not have the job security, but it's the method by which these companies are laying people off that is the most brazen and shocking of all. And that's where it shows me that corporate loyalty is completely dead, and the employer is the one who killed it. It's not the employee. Because when we look at how we got to this current labor market, a couple of years ago, right before we headed into the pandemic, things were kind of rocky. We were hitting a little bit of an economic patch, and then this pandemic came out, and suddenly the entire economy shut down. From recruiters' perspective, all the recs went on hold. We weren't hiring anybody, and companies used it as a knee-jerk reaction to lay people off. And it was almost like they couldn't wait to do it. And they would sit there in corporate meetings and pull people together and say, don't worry, we are not thinking about layoffs. That is not part of our plan. And then literally the next week, they lay off all their staff. So I saw that time and time again. Honestly, it's a deception and it's a dishonesty. But then they realized that there was profits to be made. So what did they do? They ramped up production of everything. The economy came screeching back, and all these employers in greedy fashion wanted to go out and grab as much business as they could. But what they realized that in their haste to try to grab profitability, they started racing all the other employers around them to try to snatch up the best talent. And that's why we saw the job market for just about every profession skyrocket, and specifically these software developers who are in such extreme demand that you couldn't trip out your front door without landing over a couple of employers trying to give you a job offer. So they were naming their price. And when you look at the law of supply and demand, you have this excessive demand and you have very little supply comparative, and they couldn't fill all these jobs fast enough. So they're just throwing buckets of money at everybody. And I'm sitting here watching this going, this is not going to end well, because once the bottom falls out, it's going to be the same thing that happened in 2020. And at the first indication of trouble brewing on the horizon, these companies all collectively started to cut their staff. Another position that was affected by this was recruiters. They couldn't hire enough recruiters to get people in the door. But then again, at the first sign of trouble, all these companies that possibly overhired and overcompensated for positions that they normally wouldn't do are looking at ways to cut the staff. And so they're looking for that first excuse to reduce the cost of the labor that they've purchased. And of course, for the average employee who finally felt like they had their day in the sunlight, that spotlight didn't last very long now, did it? Because we've learned the hard way that it's easy come, easy go. And here's the interesting thing about this is you can have one or two employers leading the charge and laying off, and then suddenly all the rest of the employers can look around and say, hey, they're laying off, let's all lay off too, and we won't look like the bad guys. So that's why you're seeing this collective laying off all these different companies, and certainly the economy isn't doing that poorly that all these companies need to lay off all at the same time. Because what they're doing is they're getting in front of their stockholders for earnings. They're trying to improve and pad their stats because they knew they ran up a lot of expenses with their labor costs. A lot of these jobs that were eliminated were not eliminated because the company was losing money. They were eliminated because they wanted to maximize profitability. And that's a very tough nut to swallow for people whose lives have been destroyed by this. And it's the nature of how companies have handled these layoffs that's particularly off-putting, because it illustrates how unhealthy the relationship between company and employee is right now. Of course, we've had the Great Resignation, we've had the quiet quitting, we've had all of these movements. It's almost like employees showing the symptoms of a disease that is lurking beneath the surface with careers and employment in general. And this is not just isolated to one or two employers. This is across all industries and nearly all positions. So let's take a look at some real life examples to show you how truly sick this relationship is. In this first one, we have an employee who worked at Zoom who just announced a layoff across the company. He says, "Unfortunately, I was one of the impacted workers. I was currently out on paternity leave, spending time bonding with my infant daughter. So this news comes at the worst time possible." I mean, I could imagine just being in a hospital, holding your newborn daughter for the very first time, and you get this completely insensitive call. And it's almost obnoxious that he has to deal with this phone call. Honestly, I wonder if they did it through Zoom, on their Zoom call, the Zoom layoff. But him having to deal with this obnoxious news from some completely insensitive HR department and senior leadership team who couldn't wait to allow this person to enjoy this moment, this potential, the biggest joy of their lives. But no, they couldn't wait to cut this person's job. They had to get it done immediately, and it didn't matter that he was in a hospital welcoming his daughter to the world. So as a father, he's responsible for taking care of his daughter, and I fully plan on doing that. And now he's, of course, seeking jobs in certain geographic areas. And it's really unfortunate that he has now to look potentially at COBRA coverage just to make sure that his daughter has the proper health care, because again, health care is gone, and as a laid off employees, you rely on COBRA, which is extraordinarily expensive, especially if you want to maintain the same doctors that you've been visiting, and you want to make sure that you've got continuation of coverage. Now he's looking at potentially spending $2,000 plus a month instead of the $600 that he normally would, and all those deductibles don't go away. So it's really unfortunate that this person at Zoom had to deal with this layoff over something that's likely a cost savings move rather than them actually losing money on the market. All right, let's take a look at another one here. So here we have an employee who worked at this company called Ada, who was about to put his suit on for his father's funeral. So this person is out on bereavement for his father and is dealing with the emotions of that with his family and coming to terms with his loss of a parent. And nope, they couldn't wait for that either. They had to go and lay off right then and there. There was nobody in HR, no manager that stepped in and said, hey, maybe this isn't the right message that we should be sending to the rest of our workforce that will lay off somebody who's on bereavement leave. We have to do it right now. And when I bet you when they go on the Ada's website, they're going to say that they treat their people like family. I guarantee you they'll say something like that we treat our employees, we're one big happy family. I guarantee you it's somewhere on there. I'm not going to go and check, but I guarantee it's on their website somewhere. So this person is now having to come to terms with the fact that his father has died. He's literally about to go to the ceremony, the funeral, to bury his father. And he is now dealing with another traumatic loss in his life. And it's just the timing of this is just absolutely BS. And this is also a mid-manager in a tech firm. So it's not just the individual contributor who's being affected. This is mid-management as well. Okay, so let's take a look at another one. Here we have another person who is ironically enough, is in recruiting, which has been hit extremely hard as well. It's just as hard as software developers. It's like kind of easy come, easy go. But saying not to be an overachiever, but this is my second non-performance-based layoff in 3 months. After 7 hours of interviewing, countless conversations with the leadership team, days of preparation prep, and weeks of examining public records on the company, and withdrawing from other wonderful opportunities, she had accepted a role with a company, this is 3 months ago, who cut about 20% of the entire company and exactly 80% of my team 8 days after I started in a workforce reduction initiative. How could you be so poorly planned that you don't know that there's a major layoff coming 8 days before you just hired somebody, disrupted their entire plans, ruined their career opportunities that they had. And if you're her, just imagine the roller coaster of emotions she must be feeling, where you're laid off and then you're dealing with all of those feelings and you finally get back into the job market, you apply, you land a couple of opportunities when the market was still somewhat okay, and then you accept the job you think is in the best interest of your career, only come to find out that a little over a week later, her entire department gets cut. Now she's back into it again, and now this time, not only does she not have that previous opportunity, she had the two job offers, but now she's in a much more difficult labor market where recruiting jobs are few and far between, and there's thousands and thousands of new people coming into the market each day because other companies are laying off their talent acquisition people, they're laying off their software developers, and they're all finding out the very hard way that corporate loyalty is absolutely kicked them in the butt. All right, so let's take a look at another one here. So this person had been hit by a car that left her with a concussion on Sunday, a bruised neck and a bruised shoulder blade. So I'm imagining she may have still been in a hospital or just had gotten out of a hospital, because then it looks like the next day she woke up to an email in my inbox letting me know that my role had been eliminated and I had been impacted by layoffs. She couldn't even get a phone call or a Zoom call or any kind of in-person. She had to wake up to an email that told her that she had lost her job, which is really, really disappointing that companies feel that that's okay to do. And I can't help but regret the fact that I was chasing down deals for the end of fiscal year with these injuries just to get laid off one day after. So she had these injuries and she was still trying to go out of her way, go above and beyond just to hit numbers for fiscal end of year. Moral of the story is always take care of yourself first, as companies are doing the same, and that is 100% the truth. As you can see in this case, she's injured and she's trying to still work and produce. And how does she get paid back? She gets an unceremonious email layoff. This one is a doozy. This person says, imagine waking up to an email from your CEO at 1 a.m. letting you know that your position has been eliminated is something that I've never experienced until today. It is also disheartening to know that that email was accidentally sent and that it was not supposed to go out until Wednesday, February 8th. And when she posted this, so this was in mid-January, so it was at least 2 to 3 weeks later that this layoff was supposed to happen. So the CEO with a fat finger sends off this email to everybody, and this is a senior manager and human resources, people partners at this healthcare location, and this person, this Nomad Health CEO, decides to fat finger it and let everybody know that they had been laid off way in advance. So way to ruin that one. Although I guess in some way he maybe did you a favor, or he or she did you a favor by giving you at least a few weeks advance notice, because most people who got laid off did not get advance notice. But nonetheless, that's a pretty awful one to experience. And here's one that I found very interesting, and I wanted to include it because this is a talent acquisition person who is interviewing for a company. He had been laid off from a job, so he's unemployed right now. He got caught up in the layoffs, and he said he made it to the final and third round of an interview where he gave a 30-minute presentation followed by Q&A and went through a half day of interviews consisting of about 12 people grilling me with random questions. I'm sitting here questioning, why does a TA person, a recruiter, need to put together a presentation? For what reason? There's no presenting in your day-to-day job as a recruiter other than you're talking to a job candidate and a hiring manager. But I've never heard of a recruiter being required to put together a presentation. So I'm just thinking like candidate experience. All of this work screening people out to get them in the door, it's impossible to get hired. And then the way that they handle their people on the other end is they send them emails in the middle of the night, or when they're sitting in a hospital, or when they've had a death in the family. It's just the disconnect is just so great that it is. I'm almost speechless about how this stuff works. But he's saying that there's 12 people. So 12 people grilling him. I mean, come on, 12 people in a panel. I've never even heard of 12 people in a panel before. That one even sets the new standard for poor candidate experience. I mean, just imagine sitting in a room with 12 people grilling you all at the same time. And as soon as you come up with an answer, this person over here has got the next person has got their question already lined up and they're nailing you. Then this person over here, then this person. It's like a machine gun. You're just kind of like trying to handle the volume coming at you. It's such a poor candidate experience, and I don't know what this company was thinking. But he says, here's the catch. One of these interviewers who I met with prior to the in-person interview verbatim said, well, we already met with you earlier this week, so we really don't have that much more to ask. So why are you making him come in and do this final presentation in front of 12 people? And in addition to this, it shouldn't take him all that long of a hiring decision. And some people in the comments were saying, hey, you better be careful because the company may actually see this. And the guy's like, I don't care. and I chimed in and said, I feel like maybe you want to reevaluate whether or not this is the right fit for you, because you're a talent acquisition person. And if they're treating you like this to try to get into the organization, just imagine all the other candidates and the hoops that they're going to have to jump through and how they're going to be handled with 12 panel interviews and all these projects that you need to take home and do presentations with just to get a hire, only to unceremoniously lay them off probably 3 months later. So he agreed with me. And so sometimes knowing your value is more important than taking a job that is clearly not valuing the candidate on any level is more important. So that's one of the morals of this whole rant that I'm going through. It's mind-boggling. And I also wanted to make a short. If you follow me on, I think I may have made a short even on YouTube, but if you follow me on TikTok or any of the other channels, you'll probably have already seen this, but there was an employer, a major tech employer, who laid off a whole bunch of people, lots of software developers, lots of HR people. And then literally the same week that they did that, they also posted a pipelining rec. And that's what this career opportunities role is. And if you don't know what a pipelining rec is, essentially a company or a TA department will publish a job that they have no intention of filling. So there's actually not a position even available here, but they'll publish this job with the thought, or in theory, to collect a bunch of applications. So when they do start to hire again, that they'll have a nice pool of candidates in which to choose from. And I've had hiring managers and TA leaders tell me that we wanted to do pipelining recs. And I've always put my foot down on that, saying that's not something that's candidate focused. Somebody who's excited to see a job pop up, only to realize it's the same company that laid them off and is soliciting other candidates to, it's like you get, your significant other breaks up with you, they're cheating on you, they break up with you, and then you see their name on a dating profile the same week. It's like, that's kind of how it would feel to me if I was the candidate. But nonetheless, they just laid off a whole bunch of people and they're already putting pipelining recs out. It's just the optics of it are just really poor. And if I'm the TA person, you got to pull that one down. That is just not apropos to keep that up, especially in light of the economic situation that's happening right now. So I wanted to share that one. It's another data point on this relationship. And this final one is particularly, this one, I'm going to put a little warning here. If you have sensitivity then to mental health, you may want to tune out for this part. But this one's particularly hard to read. This person said that due to horrible side effects of the layoffs, unfortunately, I lost a friend this week. She had survived various layoffs throughout 2022, but was let go on Wednesday, February the 1st, through a Zoom call. Within 2 days, she had taken her life. And she's not sure whether or not the layoff was the main factor, but it certainly was a contributing factor. And these companies who carelessly hire people away from their existing, a lot of times they'll hire people away from their companies and they'll pass up other job opportunities, and they will disrupt and take the risk in the thought of bettering themselves because these corporations convince them, these recruiting teams, and I'm sure the recruiting teams didn't know that this was going to happen, but these companies recruit these people. Some senior leader has signed off on the recruitment, and they'll pull things like this company who laid the person off after 8 days, and there's no regard for the human impact of it. And this is probably the most extreme example, but it is an example nonetheless. And I know somebody else on my LinkedIn feed, and he's probably watching this video because I remember him talking about it, is that somebody in his area, in his neighborhood, ended up doing the same thing because of a layoff. And this is a very real and permanent impact that these companies have on these people who they're carelessly hiring and then carelessly laying off. And so there has to be some accountability here for an executive who makes a decision to add headcount 1 month, only the next month to say, whoops, sorry, whoopsie daisy, you got it wrong. Let's cut these roles without any regard for the human element. And this is the unfortunate outcome of it. If you are somebody who is going through a layoff and you're dealing with a particularly emotional difficulty, and you're considering a permanent option, I implore you to get help. And there is a number here, and I'll put it up on the screen, but there's a number here that you should call and get the help that you need, because no job, no employer is worth it. There are ways to navigate through this. You're on this channel. That's my goal, is to help people get through difficult times like this and get them back to working as quickly as possible. But this is a very real and unfortunate thing, and I did want to bring it up. So sorry about the somber mood for this last one, but I did think it was worth showing. I believe that the workplace has been fractured over the course of the last, certainly 3 years, if not longer, but certainly the last 3 years. And I think that these layoffs that have happened now have fractured and will continue to fracture people as we head into the rest of 2023. I unfortunately don't think we've seen the rest of the layoffs. I think there's going to be a lot more. I think it's going to hit a lot more industries. So I implore you to start taking the steps necessary now to act like a free agent. That's what we should be learning from all of this, is that we have to act like a free agent. We have to take care of ourselves first. Start working on side hustles, guys. I'm implore you to start protecting yourself and protecting your family so that you don't rely on a single income or a single employer for the entirety of your subsistence. You have to diversify your income streams right now. You have to start putting in plans, and don't think that it won't happen to you, because I guarantee you most of the people who got laid off, just like you saw in this video, they did not expect that this was going to happen to them. They got an email message one day. Even top performers, you get an email message, suddenly have a meeting, and you're being given some news that you're kind of in disbelief of. So don't let that happen to you and not be prepared, because your family is relying on you. Your mental health is relying on you. You have to act like a free agent. And when we look at careers as a whole, is there such a thing as a long-term career within an organization anymore? I can't see a circumstance other than some very unique one-offs. And there's always going to be a person in the audience who's going to say, well, I have a long-term career and my company's great. And that's great. I'm glad that there are people out there who do have that. But I think for the vast majority of your average workers, the idea of working at a single employer or an employer for a long period of time is just not a reality that you can count on anymore. Doesn't mean that it can't happen, but I don't think you should walk into an employment situation feeling like you're going to make a career at that particular organization. It's likely that you're going to be a bit nomadic going forward. I think it's 100% proven that companies treat people like they are a commodity, and whenever they're no longer useful, they are cut and they go on, and there's again no accountability. And then a year from now or 2 years from now, when the market picks back up, they'll go and hire all these people back, and it's just the same repeating cycle. And if there's no accountability for it, there's no reason why they shouldn't stop doing it. So go in eyes wide open as you're interviewing. Make sure you're asking those hiring managers those difficult questions. Understand what their business is. Understand what their plans are. More importantly, their past performance is the best indicator of their future performance. Just like an employer's saying that to you, when they're assessing you in an interview, you have to look at how they've behaved in the past. Did they lay off in 2020? Did they lay off in 2022? Because if they did, and you're looking around the organization and they just laid off a bunch of people and they're trying to hire you, what does that show you? And if I'm somebody that's at a company who survived a layoff, I'm also thinking the same thing of, this company has no loyalty, and why should I feel comfortable here? Just because I made it through one round doesn't mean that another round's not going to come and I'm not going to get caught up in it. So be eyes wide open, and most importantly, act like a free agent. And I know this video has gotten really long, and if you followed me along to this point, I really appreciate it. If you're somebody that does need more help in your job search, you've gotten laid off, you're struggling, you're having mental health issues, and you really need to get back into the workforce as quickly as possible, that is something that I specialize in, and I have a website. It's called lifeafterlayoff.com. I encourage you to go check it out. I share a whole bunch of free tips and tricks on both my YouTube, my TikTok, and on my blog. I have a blog over there you can check out. I do share my deepest and most intimate knowledge in the form of some training courses. I do have one called Resume Rocket Fuel, which is going to help you write a resume that's going to get noticed by the recruiter. It gives you the best chance of getting noticed by those recruiters. And the purpose of that is to get you that first round interview. And then once you get that first round interview, it's up to you to sell yourself throughout the rest of the interviewing process. And that's where the ultimate Job Seeker Bootcamp comes in. It's going to walk you through each step of that interview process, how to ace each step, how to navigate through what they're looking for, and then ultimately to land that offer. And then we're going to help you negotiate that offer too. Hopefully get you some money. It'll pay for the course and all that kind of great stuff, because I think a lot of success stories there. If you want to skip the recruiter altogether, if there's any recruiters even left after all these layoffs, then that's where the course Unlocking LinkedIn comes in. It's going to teach you how to skip right to the front of the line, get past the barriers or the gatekeepers to a traditional hiring process. And we want to leverage the tools that recruiters and hiring people are using, and that's the LinkedIn platform. And then also to unlock some of those hidden opportunities through the hidden job market. Again, LinkedIn does all that stuff for you. So I created that training as really a real insider's look into how recruiters and how hiring authorities use those tools to find candidates. So it's going to give you an insider, the ultimate insider's edge. You're not going to find a more deep look at recruitment from a employee's perspective. And if you do want some more personalized help, I do offer some private one-on-one coaching. You can reach me through my website for that as well. So I appreciate you watching. I know this was a long ramble, and I'm concerned about where we're headed from a career and workplace setting. I have to admit, I just don't see this getting healthier. It's probably going to get sicker first. So as always, I'm going to bring you more content that will help you navigate all this stuff. But I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time.